The second part of my presentation is really a little bit about the thought process for change. We were thinking about innovations a long time, of course, and particularly once we started the Bapu Trust, we were thinking about what kind of world we wanted that will really be as close to our lived experiences as possible. Bapu Trust has always had a lot of people who have lived experiences of trauma, of different mental health issues, people with enduring psychosocial disabilities. And we were probably the first, organization which were building on lived experiences of persons with psychosocial disabilities in the Asia Pacific region. Recently, I found one in Fiji Islands, which is about 16 years old. There are organizations in Hong Kong which are building support systems based on lived experiences and learnings from there. These days, many of you will know that we are considered as quite capable, of course, of starting our own services. Many of us come into, service provider role in the way that we define it. So there's a lot happening out there. You can do a lot with lived experiences of mental health issues, and Bapu Trust is clearly an outcome of those experiences. We've been a service provider for about 20 years. We completed 20 years in 2019. I think that's where we are at. And so we really, of course, challenge the expert, client model of care, particularly given the kind of colonial frameworks that the mental health system in particular has derived. We believe that more egalitarian system needs to be conceived of or constructed again. So there are several developments which happened between 2005, 2006, right up to 2008, 9, 10, which helped us to think of this alternative world. And I'm going to screen share now, starting with a poem that my mother wrote. So it says, "Give me a place. I have had enough. Can I get a place at your feet?" This, of course, she's talking to Lord Krishna. "If not, an inauspicious death is better. With an unwavering heart, a mind that is not filled with obscenity, give me a place near you or give me poison. It is better to die than to live as a wandering lunatic. Please give me a place where I can be near you daily. If there is no haven for me, my mind will not be clear. The hurt that I feel in my heart will not heal. Please give it to me soon, this ignorant being who has lost herself in you. Give me a place." And of course, this poem came to me just very recently when I was preparing to present something on my life story and my mother's life story in a public event of the Bapu Trust. But I felt it had a lot to resonate with the kind of vision that we created over the years, for the Bapu Trust. For some reason, I'm not able to move my slide here. So let me see. There it is. So inclusion is for everybody and about everybody. This is the vision of the Bapu Trust. We dream of healing environments where every person uses their own capacity to make choices, heal themselves, recover, and move on. Recovery methods will be creative, non-violent, non-hazardous, and playful. And this is a very old vision, actually. It's been with us for about 15 years. And we are looking at transforming communities and families and not just targeting individuals for treatment. And we have this very ambitious aspiration of building emotionally resilient communities, which will not just give something to people with psychosocial disabilities or give something to people with, with mental health issues, but it will be a community where everyone can offer support to each other and care. So there is the idea embedded in there that any transaction which is one directional, one hand giving and one hand receiving, is always, a situation of power and social imbalance. And it needs to be, this. And so that's the vision with which we kind of created the Bapu Trust Seher program. And it had its own checkered history, I would say, because when we started it, we started it with all good intention as yet another. These are some pictures of our communities. We work in low-income communities of Pune. We work in, right now we have like a really vast population coverage. I would say this is one of the largest community-based support programs in all of Asia Pacific, if not in the global south. It's like really vast. Our coverage is about 29 low-income communities of Pune. We call them human settlements or bastis. And yeah, we work a lot with women, with persons with disabilities, with young people, young adults, and all of that. And as these pictures show, even in the vision statement, we use a lot of creative methods. And I will come to that in a moment. And it took us all of 15 years to arrive at a design which is somewhat satisfactory for us. There were three major developments between 2005 and 2000, I would say 8, 9, which helped us really to arrive at the present design of the Bapu Trust services. The services itself has been called Seher for about ever since we began it. But it changed many formats. It developed several additional elements as we went along. We kept tweaking the design. We had several small research projects, that interns did. For example, from the University of Edinburgh, we had some interns. From Tata Institute, we had interns. We had interns from a lot of places who focused on small research pieces, gave us feedback. We had evaluators. We had our own internal assessment process. So we had what is called learning cycles before we kind of tweaked the design. Unfortunately, a lot of that was not published at the time. Just our interest was that, are we anywhere close to our vision? Are we equalizing care relationships? Are we creating support systems? Are we reclaiming communities for what they are meant to be, that is support systems for not just people with disabilities, but for the world at large, for their communities, for their neighborhoods? Are the neighbors closely knit? Can you kind of depend on them to offer support rather than, engage in a stigmatizing way? So all of those questions kind of came up for us along the way. Are we happy with just people recovering from their, symptoms? Do we want to look at something more than just recovery? So all those questions came to us. And I think these questions kept coming to us as we went deeper and deeper into the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We were engaged with the convention right from 2005 when it was in the drafting stage, and kept it up, and we continue to dip into it, do our learnings, our trainings, all of that. It was a big decolonizing instrument for our program. Earlier, we had a traditional mental health program, The vision was this, but we were providing mental health services towards treatment of people with mental health issues. We had a clinic set up. Some professionals were running this setup. It didn't work. In 1 year, we had just 40 clients, and most of them dropped out. It was not satisfying. We had no engagement with communities. We didn't know who our communities were. Who are these people? Why are we talking to them about their lives when we know absolutely nothing about how they live? Are they talking to each other saying that I have schizophrenia, I'm hearing voices, I have depression? Are they talking to each other like this? So these are the questions that came up at the end of that period. Actually, we shut down that part of the program and we started afresh in 2008. By then, we also had very good exposure to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We went back and talked to people. We talked to people about their feelings, how do they talk about emotional distress. We talked a lot about how do they feel thras. Thras is how they express themselves, and largely it's a very, very common word in our communities that people say that thras hoto, we have thras. And so we unbundled words like that: tension, thras, chinta, bad, dar, all of that. We unbundled many of those concepts. We did a census to find out the community structuration of where we were working. Are they and no surprise, we did not find any upper caste people in our communities. Mostly they were minority groups or people from the Dalit neo-Buddhist communities. No surprise there. Not many from the open caste communities or the upper caste communities, so to speak. We understood the lives of people by doing lots and lots of baseline research, doing some ethnographies, all of that. And so by the time we got back to an idea that we really need to look at design, and we should not do community mental health in the traditional way, even though we never really did believe in psychiatric medication, but the traditional design came with those, Western colonial assumptions that up to this point, a psychologist or a psychiatric social worker can support, but after that, you make a referral to a psychiatrist. So that assumption was not changed in that design. Also talk therapy. Talk therapy is a very elite. That's how it is taught us, that it is very elite and you can't do talk therapy because, primitive communities do not so and so. And I think this audience knows very much all those assumptions. It was not that communities do not talk. It is that they use a different language, and that is body speak. And we were ignorant. We were not aware that there is this whole discourse about body speak that we needed to, get to in order to have a design which was culturally appropriate, which actually served the purpose for which it was made, and all of that. So trauma trainings, exposure to the new biology. At that time, Bessel van der Kolk visited us in Pune. We had a wonderful workshop with him. We were exposed to the work of, Peter Levine, all of that. Trauma work, mindfulness was picking up in a big way in Pune city. We had enlightened teachers coming to teach us here in Pune city. This was 2005, 2008. The arts-based therapy course was started by the World Center for Creative Learning Foundation. It was a total sensory blast to be exposed to some of these new ways of looking at trauma and healing from trauma. And we realized that, these are not, these have just been obscured. These forms of knowledge and practice have just been obscured from the typical clinical psychology textbook and the typical psychiatry textbook. They never entered the mental health field in the way that they should have. These have also very long and credible histories in the world of knowledge and practice. Of course, there was also the assumption that the West gives to the East, and the East really has nothing of its own when we have traditions which are at least 2,500 years old, with 80,000 practices. The Indian mind traditions, Buddhism, for example, offers 80,000 mind training techniques, and what can compare with that? It's a 2,500-year-old tradition. And so there is all of that. So we got exposed to some of these things while we went around cross-checking, that, okay, we have this wonderful new thing about the body and the body speaking and all of that, but how does it match with the lived experiences of people, and the match was wonderful. I mean, it was like really a lot of congruence between what we were learning from these traditions and what we were hearing from our communities. It was our fortune that we got a really great project from the Dutch Indo-Dutch partnership on development, and we conducted 3 years of research on traditional healing and indigenous practices. Here I have to, I'm compelled to show you some of these photographs. We did an exhibition, and the exhibition had amazing cultural expressions of distress and healing. For me, it's so difficult to think of something as distress and something else which somebody else needs to do as healing. This is for me it's a binary that I think that the Cartesian dichotomy and all the traditions that have come out of that, including, of course, Western psychology, So we did this exhibition. Of course, we almost got pelted by the modernists and the rationalists. It was a public exhibition. This one is a beautiful healing tradition in Maharashtra. And of course, the very visible connection with nature, with dance, with movement, and if you go closer to this particular caravan, then there is like incense, and there is bells, and there is dole, the drums, and these are men. Cultural expression, creative expression, we learned from this. I mean, wherever we went, we saw some amazing drummers, folk drummers, and they were using it for seances and for healing sessions. Many of them were seasoned counselors, and they were not using talk therapy. They were using art forms, all of that. So we saw many of these, and at the same time, we did a lot of this. Just an example of some of the words that people used in our communities to express themselves. It doesn't read, of course, like a diagnostic, like a diagnostic set of categories. So they were expressing themselves as like, body feels like rubber, the waist jerks, the veins in the thumb hurt, there is a snake curled inside, there are burning sensations, the body is tight, hands are numb, hot fumes are coming out from the body. There is a tapping on the head. I feel heavy from the spine to my leg joint. I'm feeling pulled, my hair is pulled. There are knots in my lower back, there are knots in my neck, there are knots in my chest. Body feels loose, there's a lot of itching. The veins are bursting from inside. There is fire in my stomach, there is fire in my head region. The legs are tickled, there is no blood in vein, and so on and so forth. And there was a huge metaphor of pain that we heard in these expressions, and we gathered quite a lot of them, coming back to the imprint on our design, there were these major 3 trends. One was the conventional rights of persons with disabilities, which really talked about if people don't have food, housing, employment, social protection, security, freedom to choose, freedom to determine their own lives in the way that they want, access to sporting, culture, leisure. There are over 30 rights in the convention. And if these are not available to a person, then their experience of their impairment, so to speak, is aggravated to a great extent, and that whole, the impairment and the enormous social barriers which restricts their participation, that constitutes the disability. And again, it's a very Cartesian binary, that you have the impairment, you correct that, and people will already be included. No, you have to address the whole ecosystem, the impairment as well as the ecosystem which aggravates the experience of exclusion and marginalization. Then the bodies speak. It came to us in different ways through the arts-based therapy training. These days we run a full year's course on arts-based therapy. And the research on traditional healing and indigenous practices, where every center, we visited over 21 centers, and every center had creative expression at the very core of devotion. And for us, that part was healing. So after that, we started to say that, there is a brain has a God center, and you need to stimulate it now and again. Otherwise, you don't feel full and satisfied. Then we had exposure and extensive documentation of community and cultural idioms of distress. So I would say that these three elements that we were exposed to as part of our own learning helped us to really create the community mental health program. From a point of view of, number one, broad gestures of working with populations, neighborhoods, and communities, and then households and individuals. So we didn't just directly land at the individual and start work with them, but it was really at the population, the neighborhood, the community, the stakeholders in the community, and then inching closer towards the smallest social unit, that is the family, and then the person. So we arrived at that. The second one was that you really had to have body speak, as the overall universe of discourse, particularly if you're working in low middle income countries, and if you're looking at at culturally sensitive ways of engaging, communicating, supporting people with mental health issues and psychosocial disabilities. And of course, the third one is to have a really wide range of strategies to reach out and support people. And I think that will be the third segment that I will bring to you today.